Since Ron didn't give me very much time. Just kidding. All right, so for those of you, actually I know quite a few people here. I met you at last few Workologies. I was laughing that I've been to everyone except the very first one. So I just keep coming back. So let's get started. For those of you, is that going to work? There we go. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Vanessa Edwards. I'm the president of Creative Performance, and my background is as a former agency principal. I, to this day, still say I'm a recovering agency principal. So I had a digital agency back in 2005 to 2010, which I sold in 2010, but we grew at about 80% a year every year, which, as a lot of you guys know, there's quite a few companies out here that are high growth companies. That's a really difficult thing to do, right? Because at the end of the day, you're growing, you're making processes, you're breaking them as fast as you're making them as you're going through this explosive growth. And one of the things that I did at that time was I knew that I needed a technology. And so that's when I found Creative Manager Pro way back in the day and have sort of evolved with Workology. But what we did was we built a methodology around Workology. And Workology has done an amazing job of building a platform for an industry that prides themselves on doing things differently, right? So they've had to build this great technology. But what we try to bring to the table is the people, process, and the technology, all three of those things together, and that's really where CPI was born out of building a methodology that could give me as a principal what I needed to run that business, that could give me, as being in charge of operations, being in charge of finance, what did I need across the board from this integrated system to be able to make the right decisions in my business. And that was really the foundation for helping business owners make good decisions and really implement the right processes and the right procedures to be a better company, holistically. So, so that was creative. That's CPI, and that my entire team's up here. You can, if you haven't met them, they're amazing. But also, we founded Agency Story. So Agency Story is a culmination of all of the things that we have learned over the years that you can pull together in data and insights, ultimately to again make good data-driven decisions in your business. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Working on this project has been one of the most fun things for me because we've gotten so many beautiful ones and zeros, out of data. But at the end of the day, that doesn't change behavior, right? So we worked with some of the best visualization experts in the world through this project, and that's where we ended up actually being published in the Big Book of Dashboards, which is really fun. So again, we'll talk a little bit about. You're going to ask me how does this relate to PM, and I promise you, it actually does. But I want to start by just talking really briefly about some industry observations. So we've worked with, several hundred agencies at this point in time over the last 9 years. And it has been, it's been an amazing ride. But what are some of the things that we're seeing consistently in the agency world, right? So these are just some of the things, and I can't talk about all of them, obviously, because I don't have time, but some of the things what I'm hearing, what people really want, they need project management to increase throughput and project profitability and insight, and really help with insights. And so that's something that people are really looking for. Now, not everybody's getting it, but that's what they're really trying to do. And at the end of the day, they really want that profit that drives sustainable growth. Because we know that profitability is a little bit of a bad word in this industry, but for the wrong reasons. Because at the end of the day, your profitability actually fuels opportunity for your agency. Your ability to do cool new things comes from being able to be profitable. The ability to invest in your people, invest in your company, in your culture, all comes from the profitability. So if you don't have it, it shouldn't be a bad word. It really should be, it's a requirement to have a good business. Okay? And I think that I just want to dispel that rumor because there's this concern we're not allowed to be profitable. And that's a huge problem. And it's really changed the focus of the industry. So, but what's getting in the way of all of these things, right? So what we're seeing out there as we go and do our audits and we work with our clients is that people have attempted to roll out PM and to varying degrees of success. So some have completely failed and people are like back to an old school model of account and traffic. And some people have gotten part of the way there. We're going to talk a lot more about this. They've gotten part of the way there and they're just sort of stuck and they can't quite figure out how to get that completely rolled out. But they're not getting the value out of the discipline that they could. And then they're going, well, see, I knew this wasn't going to work, but they weren't doing it right. And then the other piece that I'm seeing is that because agencies are ignoring this concept of what I'm going to talk about later, financial potential and opportunity cost. They're not really recognizing how critical these 2 points are. They're not realizing what they're leaving on the table. They're not realizing literally the dollars they are throwing out the window. And because of that, they don't think of it as such a big deal. And that's where I think they go really wrong. So let's talk about PM. So I have spoken, I think, 4 times at Workology, and 3 of those times have been on project management. And the one thing I think you'll learn, if you don't already know this, you will learn very quickly, is that project management is very near and dear to my heart. So I love project management. And what I want everybody to understand or take away from this is that, we're going to talk about the evolution of PM. We're going to talk about not what PM is today. I'm going to tell you about what PM needs to be. I'm going to tell you what PM of the future is for agencies. And we're going to talk about the evolution. I'm going to talk about how we're going to get there. But I'm going to talk about PM as a discrete, valued, respected discipline within an agency. And for those of you PMs out there, you know that this is actually a tough place to be. It's not very sexy. People think of client services and account management as the sexy roles, or creative director. Nobody thinks of the project manager as the sexy role. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping by the end of this presentation, you will all think project management is sexy. That's what I'm hoping. I'm working hard, okay? So, and what I want you to recognize is at the end of the day, I'm going to start off, bear with me with some financial concepts because they're really important to really understanding how PM impacts everything. So I'm going to start with some financial concepts, and then I'm going to dig deep into PM and PM evolution, and then we're going to take that into what do I actually get out of that as an agency. So think of your agency. You have a current financial snapshot of your agency, okay? So this is my in essence, my P&L. So this is where I'm at today. Every agency has a potential, okay? There is this potential out here of what I could be. If everything was working properly, if everything was working well, this is what I be. But not everything is measurable to agency potential. I can't measure everything. And so a lot of times people throw the baby out with the bathwater and they say, well, if I can't measure everything, I'm going to measure nothing. And I'm like, nothing above my current financial snapshot. And I say, you know what? No, that doesn't make sense. So this is our opportunity cost, right? This is literally the gross opportunity cost of what I am not getting. Okay, but what I could be getting if I was running well. And this is where our financial potential comes in. So take it, let's say, and let's measure all the things we know we can measure, and then let's put a stake in the ground and say, this is my financial potential. This is what my agency absolutely could be if I was running on all cylinders. Okay? So that financial model, that financial potential is predicated on a financial model, obviously. It can't just be I didn't make it up out of nowhere. So I have a financial model that I'm building off of. And that financial model was validated and tested with KPIs. So I know it's right, okay? That's the other key piece here. And it's continuously improved, right? So my financial model is not something I just set and I never look at again. I look at it and I change it and I update it and I figure out what can I really do with this organization as a whole. So we start there. And what we can now recognize is we have what we call our financial opportunity cost, okay? This is literally the part we can measure, the part we can absolutely measure. But here's the thing. What we need to know is what that is. So someone tells you, you have a $2 million financial opportunity cost, okay? What does that mean to you, right? And just being able to say, hey, it's $2 million, that's actually, it's not very helpful at the end of the day. It kind of just makes you feel bad about yourself. But what if someone told you, this is how it breaks down. This is how you can fix that thing. This is how you can get there. I can take that and actually operationalize that, and I can make the agency get there. I can create a roadmap for how to get there. Because otherwise, just saying, hey, you have $2 million in financial opportunity cost is like the consultant standing on the Titanic saying, hey, you got a hole in your boat, right? Like, that's really helpful, thank you. I know I have a hole, but you needed to tell me way back here, you needed to tell me that I needed to change my course. You needed to tell me I needed to do something. But you didn't say anything, and now I hit it, and pointing it out isn't going to help me. So, what do? So, we need to know the composition of this box. Okay? This is really important for our agency. So, I've got $2 million here. Okay? So, that $2 million is made up of multiple things. Let's talk about, so I have a utilization gap, right? So my utilization are my billable hours, right? My working on billable projects. And everybody knows that we set labor budgets, right? And we build our entire financial model off of how billable our group of billable people can be, correct? That's how we know whether we're going to stay in business. So obviously, if I have a utilization gap to that financial model, then I am not running on all cylinders, right? So I need to know how much of that gap is made up of a utilization problem. I also could have a rate margin problem, right? So I should have a certain margin, and my financial model is predicated on me having a certain margin in all of my rates. And if I don't meet that margin, then at the end of the day, my financial opportunity cost is made up of the missing margin. That could be a big one, client negotiated rates, right? Or, those retainer deals gone bad, which we were talking about earlier. So that's another big piece. And then the last piece, which is so critical, is your realization gap, okay? So this is all the gross dollars of the billable transactions that never got billed to the client, right? It's the over budget transactions, right? So at the end of the day, if I can break my financial opportunity cost down into these three buckets, I actually can figure out how to solve the problem. But just giving me a big number, and I don't know which way to go. I play whack-a-mole with operations all the time, not knowing ultimately what solution I need. And you don't solve these the same way. You do not solve a utilization gap the way you solve a realization gap, the way you solve a rate problem. They're completely different. So if you just know one big number and you have no more data than that, then you don't actually know which way to go. Because I'll give you an example. A lot of people want to solve a utilization gap before a realization gap. That's great. I'm going to increase my throughput of work I'm not getting paid for. Brilliant, right? Not a good idea. Fix your realization gap first. Fix your rate margin first, and then get that throughput. And it doesn't mean that you can't be working on them all at the same time, but don't work on one without attempting to fix the other, because you're going to create bigger problems for yourself. And then just working people harder and not having the profit to build the culture and to invest in the people, that's when you end up in the spiral, right? So let's talk a little bit more about this. One of the things is Everybody asks me, is every agency the same? Well, they all have very similar problems, but to varying different degrees. So for example, I could have this first agency that has a really large utilization gap, but a smaller rate margin and a maybe smaller realization. A lot of agencies have all of these problems. And agency 2 might look different and actually might not have a utilization gap problem, but might have a bigger rate margin and realization. Okay? All of the agencies are very unique. I would say the smaller the agency, the more likely it's a realization gap than a utilization gap, because people in the smaller agencies are usually really busy. They're running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and the utilizations are through the roof, but we're not bringing in the profit that we need. And all of a sudden you're going, well, why? So this is where you have to understand that you cannot look at agencies the same because they don't have the same mix of these problems. And therefore, your solutions are different. So let's talk about your utilization gap. Okay? So what do we do? How do we fix a utilization gap, right? So you should be reducing your work. Well, we talked about it. You guys are rebranding and working on your website all the time, right? Okay. Well, maybe we do it once. How many internal initiatives are you focused on, and is that dragging down your people's utilizations? It's one thing to do it when you don't have the work. It's another thing to keep your best resources, because you always use your best resources on yourself, right? So what you're doing is you're taking your best resources and not allowing them to do client work. Okay. There's also a lot of non-billable client administrative work that gets done. So reduce the excessive pitching. These are all different things, and we're going to talk more about how PM can help these things. But again, having project management involved in both your non-billable projects and your billable projects, key there. That's going to help you be more efficient with those things and help you increase that utilization. Let's talk about rate margin. How do we fix rate margin? Well, you can increase your standard rates. You can increase your negotiated rates. A lot of times, people's senior rates aren't really as senior as they need to be for what they're paying people, right? Look at that rate ratio. And if your rate ratios aren't right, you got to address that. I've walked into a lot of agencies where they're paying excessive amounts of money for maybe creative talent that's 20% billable, right? It's just not a good business model. It doesn't really work. So, thinking about how that's going to work. And then the other big one is those contractor and freelancer margins. A lot of people aren't getting the margin they should be getting on contractors and freelancers. They're marking them up like outside production instead of bigger margin, which is not good. But that's another place PM plays. So let's talk about your realization gap. Okay, so this is, again, the more over-servicing and over-delivering you do, the internal mistakes that happen, all of that, you've got planned investments, or discounts on projects, or all of those unbilled out-of-scope requests, right? It's every bit of over-budget transactions, that all of those things that we were not able to get billed back to the client. That is probably where I see the biggest opportunity for agencies if you want to tackle something right away. And this is also one of the things that project management has the largest impact on. Now, they have an impact on all of these things, but this is probably where I would say they have the biggest impact. And I would personally say that I think that your project management team has the largest impact on an agency's profitability of any team. Because I've seen a lot of agencies running at just this awful to no profit at all, and they can get project management in, and all of a sudden it can change that perspective. Because if you think about the advocacies, right? We're going to talk about account managers are advocating for the client. To do their jobs right, they have to advocate for the client. That's their job. And they have to want to do marketing for that client, marketing strategy. And so at the end of the day, you need to have, and your creative director is always going to advocate for the work, always. It's going to advocate for the creative. However, your project manager is that agency advocate. Outside of accounting, who can't be in the room all the time when everything's happening, your project manager is that advocate. So, we know all of that, but now what? Okay? What are we going to talk about? So what I want to talk about is how project management, we're talking about how project management impacts everything, all of those things, and why it's so critical and so important to your organization. And it's so important that you get it right. And I talk to a lot of people who say they have project management, and at the end of the conversation, I'm like, no, you don't have project management. You think you have project management, but you don't have project management.